All right, we want to welcome everybody to our Bible study tonight. I want to thank you for joining us. This is part 2, the DNA of the seed of Abraham. This is part 2 from last week. We had part 1. And this is entitled, How Faith Works Through Circumcision. I want to bring the screen up again in order to get a better understanding. As I said, this is part 2 of the DNA of the seed of Abraham. However, this is part 4 of the series. So in order to get a good and thorough understanding, Am I really a Christian was part 1. Understanding the mystery of the law of circumcision was part 2. And then the DNA of the seed of Abraham was part 3. So again, this is part 4 of a 4-part series. And Elder, if you want to go ahead, if we don't have a objective for today, so if we want to talk a little bit about what the objective of this show is about, this Bible study, then we can take it from there.
Well, the objective for this week is pretty much the same as it was on last week. We want to show basically a difference between the seed of Abraham, because Abraham was the father of many nations. He had a blessed seed, and then he had another seed that was not the blessed seed, but yet they were the offspring of Abraham. In this particular series, however, we'll be showing again the particular DNA of that blessed seed and what it is that El requires of his people in order to obtain the blessings of Abraham. So we'd like for you to take your time, make sure you got a good seat, listen carefully to what's being said here so that you'll know how the faith works with DNA, faith and works, and how that leads to receiving all the blessings of promise.
Okay. And I just want to bring up what you said as I go back to the screen here. We're talking about how faith and how works, faith and works, how that is a essential tool to having our hearts circumcised. Okay, so that's an overall objective of what we're going to speak on today. You know, as we do each and every week, part 1, and I don't have that slide here, but part 1, everyone is muted, and it's going to be the lecture. Part 2 is when we're going to open it up for our questions and answers. Circumcision and walking in the steps of the faith of Abraham. What does it mean to walk in the steps of that faith of Abraham? Elder?
Well, once we began to review what Abraham did, now everybody knows that Abraham is called the father of the faithful because Abraham had faith. What most people don't recognize or don't know is that Abraham did more than just have faith. And this lesson is designed to show how Abraham not only had faith, he had works, and that there are stages of the faith of Abraham. Those stages would include hearing the word, believing the word, doing what the word says, and then continuing in the word. And we'll see that shortly.
Okay. I don't know if did you get a chance. I was doing some other thing. Did you read this, or did you want me to go ahead and read this?
Go right ahead. I didn't. Okay. We didn't read it yet.
Okay. Too often, individuals who claim to be the sons and daughters of Abraham make their claim without ever attempting to walk in these steps of that faith which Abraham exhibited. Because the Bible characterizes Abraham as the father of the faithful, those same individuals tend to believe that only faith is required for salvation and not works. Now, a lot of you know we've been having these discussions back and forth with a lot of people who say, well, we don't have to do any works. All we need to do is have the faith. Okay. However, as Romans the 4th chapter, verse 11 and 12 suggests, the sign of circumcision received by Abraham was a seal of the righteousness of the faith which he had, although he was uncircumcised. It was only through this process that he became the father of all them that believed and of them that were circumcised, who walked in his steps of the faith of faithful Abraham. But ask yourself, did Abraham exercise faith without works, or did he perform works as well? Now, Elder, we have some important things here that we have underlined that I want to take a minute to talk about. We have attempting to walk in the steps of that faith which Abraham exhibited. But we also have something important in that next paragraph that's underlined, that the sign of circumcision received by Abraham was of the righteousness of the faith which he had, although he was uncircumcised. What does that mean?
Well, and we'll see more about this later. When Abraham was called of El, he was a Gentile. He was not a believer per se. But once he heard the voice, he recognized the voice as being El, and he had faith and believed El for his word. Well, not only did he believe, but later on the Bible shows us that he actually performed certain works. Now, as a result of believing, though, he became the father of the circumcised, and the circumcised were those believers who already had walked in faith and who were already keeping what the word said do. But not only did he become the father over them, he became the father of the uncircumcised, being uncircumcised himself. And the uncircumcised are the Gentiles. So he's the father of the faithful because he's the father over those who are saved and have no need of continually go through those steps, and those who are not saved who need to now go through the steps that Abraham went through.
Okay. And, Elder, I want to bring up something that you said real quick, and it's kind of a little off the topic, but it is related to this. You said that Abraham was a Gentile. Now, some people may not understand what that means because they said that Abraham was a Hebrew. In what way are we saying that he was a Gentile?
Well, when we talk about Gentile, the Bible really divides people up into two groups. Either you are the child of El, or you are a Gentile. That means that you are not of his people. And that's the way we're really using the word Gentile, that you are not saved, you are not a believer. So when Abraham first believed, he was a sinner.
Okay. Abraham, father of the circumcised and the uncircumcised. Even though righteousness was imputed unto Abraham based upon his faith. In other words, he was granted righteousness based on his faith. As the elder said, he didn't have any works yet. El counted him worthy of performing the works necessary for complete salvation. Hebrews chapter 11 makes this point clear by describing works with respect to the faith of Abraham. So, Elder, we have these few Bible verses here in Hebrews, the 11th chapter, verse 17 through verse 19. But if you want to go ahead and read that, and we can talk about these two Bible verses, and then we'll move on from there.
Well, while I'm reading this, I want to point out that the entire 11th chapter talks about faith. But it does not talk about faith independent of works. It tells us what these believers did as well as what they believed. And we just pulled out the information concerning Abraham here. So it says, by faith, Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac. Now, that's a work. You're not just believing. In order to offer up your son, you believe and then you did something. So he offered up Isaac, and he that had received the promises offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said that in Isaac shall thy seed be called, accounting that El was able to raise him up, even from the dead, from which also he received him in a figure. So Abraham had faith, all right, but he worked and moved on that faith that he had. So the works that you do show the extent of the faith that you have. And that was the 11th chapter, verses 17 through 19. And if we look at verses 8 through 10, it says, by faith Abraham, when he was called to go into a place which he should after receive for an inheritance, obeyed. Now we can see how his faith was combined with his obedience or his works. And he went out, not knowing whither he went. By faith he sojourned in the land of promise, as in a strange country, dwelling in tabernacles with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he looked for a city which hath foundations, whose builder and maker is El. So he didn't just have faith, and the 11th chapter of Hebrews is showing how that faith was combined with works.
And we're going to move up. That was a great, Elder. We're going to move in a lot into this later on here in the Bible study. But for people to insinuate or even suggest that faith alone is sufficient, we're going to see it's not, because it was imputed unto Abraham based upon faith, as Elder said, and we're going to see in many Bible verses that Abraham had many works. And even without us going through this, I believe that many of the Bible believers know that Abraham did a number of different works after this time. By faith alone, or by faith and works, James makes the point that faith without works is dead. Now, in the book of James, the 2nd chapter, I'm going to read verses 14 through 20. And we're going to see how faith and works combined together is necessary to please El. It says, "What doth it profit, my brethren, though a man say he hath faith, and have not works? Can faith save him? If a brother or sister be naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you say unto them, Depart in peace, be ye warmed and filled, notwithstanding ye give them not those things which are needful to the body, what doth it profit? Even so faith, if it hath not works, is dead, being alone." So your faith means nothing without the works. "Yea, a man say, Thou hast faith, and I have works. Show me thy faith without thy works, and I will show thee my faith by my works. Thou believest that there is one El, thou dost well. The devils also believe." See, there's a whole bunch of people who say they believe and tremble. "But without know, O vain man, that faith without works is dead." James is being redundant, Elder, that it is impossible to, if you say, well, oh, I have faith. And how many people say that just in the world? Oh, I have faith. I have faith. I have faith that I'm gonna be rich. Well, do you think that's enough if you don't go to school, if you don't have a plan, if you don't execute that plan? So we can see this in our everyday lives, that without works, your faith is in vain, and without faith, your works is in vain.
If I might just step in for just a minute, the writer James is making this point so clear, and as you said, he's being redundant. But here it says, "Even so faith, if it has not works, is dead, being alone." In other words, James is one of the only writers that lets you know that faith by itself is not enough. Now, we have plenty of ministers that would tell you to have faith, pray the prayer of faith, and we believe that you're saved. And they say that the law is done away with, so they don't do any works. But you can't make it to the kingdom, brothers and sisters, without works, because your works are the evidence of your faith. How do I know you have faith and I don't have anything I can see? Faith is not seen, not until your works show that you have faith. We know that Abraham had faith because of what? He took his son to sacrifice it. We know that he had faith because he sojourned in that land. So faith, as James said, without works is dead. Why? Because you cannot have faith by itself.
Okay. And we can talk for days. I mean, we're going to be focused and stay focused on this lesson, but I mean, we can have several Bible studies on faith, and we can have probably 4 months straight Bible studies on works, which, we attribute to be the law. And so this is excellent, and this is New Testament. And before we move on, Elder, I don't know if you want to address this. Why is it that although we see these Bible verses, that people are so adamant on having faith only without works?
Well, and I'm glad you said that, because ministers, you hardly ever see them read this passage. They will constantly tell you about having faith, but not about the works that are necessary with your faith. So we have to let people know that the Bible is not saying that faith alone is important. Faith must be combined with works.
Okay. So now we're going to talk about the parable of the sower. And for those that are in the chat room, I want to just see how many people have read this before, who's familiar with this. If you've read the parable, if you're familiar with it, if you can just let me know here. Type in yes, and if not, just let us know. And we just want to make sure we do have sound. I want to make sure that everybody is able to hear. I think the microphone next to the microphone and earphones should be green. If you click it, I think it turns red.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So there are those who've heard of the parable of the sower. So just let us know, Yisra'el 12, if you still can't hear. Elder, we're going to go ahead and talk about the parable of the sower. Based upon the previous passages, walking in the step of the faith of Abraham means to complete all the steps of faith as accomplished by Abraham. If we truly intend to walk by faith, we will complete the necessary works that are the evidence of that faith. In the books of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the writer describes how Yahshua, which is Jesus, characterized the stages of grace. So now we're talking about grace in the parable of the sower. In a comparison of these three Gospels, Matthew 13th chapter, verse 3 through 23, Mark 4, 3 through 20, and Luke 8, 5 through 15, Yahshua provided and clearly outlines the significance of completing, of hearing, believing, and performing the word of El. In step one, the hearing of faith, he states, when anyone heareth the word of the kingdom and understandeth it not, then cometh the wicked one and catcheth away that which was sown in his heart. This is he which received seed by the wayside. So, Elder, if we want to talk about this Bible verse here.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good. Now, what we want you to pay attention to very carefully as we're reading these segments is we've underlined the word hearing, because hearing is that first stage of grace. Okay? And we're going to look at these a little bit at a time, as stage by stage, so you can see what Yahshua himself is telling you you need to do in order to be saved. Now, one scripture tells us that by grace are you saved through faith. Well, if you're saved by grace through faith, then we need to know what that is. So this first writer in Matthew 13 and 19 is saying that this individual heard the word. But what we'll find is that hearing is not enough, because almost as soon as he heard the word and didn't understand it, however, then cometh the wicked one, and he catches away everything that person had. And many of our young people, our new converts, they find themselves in that stage where they heard the word, they get excited, and guess what? Here comes the enemy and snatches the word out of their heart.
Okay? So now, are we saying that this is that unmerited grace, or grace that everybody is allowed to hear?
Well, the first stage, everyone gets to hear. So now what we are saying, though, is grace. There's a number of verses on grace, but all grace is not the same. So, but the grace of hearing, everyone gets the opportunity to hear, because you can't be judged if you never heard.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is, make sure you're clear, this is stage one. Everyone has the opportunity to hear.
Okay.
And if babies that come into the world, they don't have the opportunity, to have to come back so they can hear the word, because they can't be judged without hearing.
Okay.
Now, but when we go to Mark, Mark tells the same story, but he tells it in his words. And these are they by the wayside. Now, we're talking about the same group, where the word is sown. But when they have heard, there's the hearing again. Satan cometh immediately and taketh away the word that was sown in their hearts. So hearing is not enough. And that's what we have to get from this first portion of the parable of the sower. Also in Luke, the same thing. These by the wayside are they that hear. Then cometh the devil and taketh away the word out of their heart, lest, now if he didn't take the word out of the house, lest they should believe and be saved. Now we're getting a hint at what the next stage of grace is.
Okay. So, and I want to sum this up again, that these people in stage one, they heard the word. But before they can digest, before they can understand it, Satan came and snatched it up out of them. And then here it says, lest they should believe and be saved. So
that's all right.
We're going to the next stage. So if it remained in them, then, of course, they will probably believe it, and then they will be saved. So let's look at what the next part says. The parable of the sower, Yahshua, explanation of the stages of grace, salvation, according to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. This is stage 2, believing and receiving.
Now, if I might say, if you read the entire story, you'll find that first he gave the parable of the sower. Afterward, he began to explain what it meant. But if we look at stage 2 is believing the word. Now you've heard it. The next step is to believe it. And what we want to find out from this is hearing and believing enough. In Matthew, the 13th chapter, if we look at verses 20 and 21 this time, it says, but he that receives seed into stony places. This is a second type of place that an individual is. Once they were by the wayside, but this group, and I want you at the end of this to figure out which group are you. This group was found in stony places. The same as he that heareth the word. Note they're going through that same first stage. And anon receive it with joy. So receiving, that's another way of saying they believed it. That's because they received it to themselves. Yet hath he not root in himself, but dureth, in other words, he lasts for a while. For when tribulation and persecution arises, because of the word, by and by he is offended. And if you look at the old English definition of the word offended, that means that you sin.
Okay.
Now, if we look in the book of Luke, who gives the same story in his words, they on the rock. Only difference is he didn't say stony places. He used the word rock. They on the rock are they which when they hear, receive the word with joy. So they believed it. So they received it with joy. And these have no root, which for a while they believed. So they went to the step of believing. And in time of temptation, though, they fall away. So what we're beginning to see here is that even hearing and believing is not enough. You know, we just read the verse a little while ago that even Satan believeth. You think you're doing something because you hear it and believe it? The devil believeth, the Bible says, and trembleth. So you're doing no more than what the devil does.
Right.
Now let's look at Mark, the 4th chapter, verses 16 and 17. And these are they likewise which are sown on stony ground, who when they have received it, so they believed it too, with gladness, and have no root in themselves, so endure for but a time. Now afterwards what happened? When affliction or persecution arises for the word's sake, immediately they are offended. So all those that hear and go to the second stage of grace, they believe it. If you don't keep on believing it, if you allow the enemy to come and take it out of you, guess what? It's not enough.
Right.
Mashiach continues to tell the parable because, by golly, we're going to get to a point where we have at least enough. And that's what you have to do.
Okay. And there are people, if we can give examples before we move on, Elder, the people who hear, and if we want to just talk about that, because I want to kind of, if we can, relate it. People who hear the word and they say, oh, that's right. Let's say we're talking about the Sabbath, for instance. People will hear it. They'll see it in the Bible. They'll say, boy, the Sabbath is right. Oh, I believe in the Sabbath. But, I don't know, somebody offered them a job making X amount of dollars. How much do they really believe in the Sabbath? Or some people are praying, and, you know, they believe in praying and calling on his name. But if things are not working for them,
they lose the faith.
They lose the faith. So This is why we see here in the Bible we're talking about when tribulation or persecution arises. In time of temptation, fall away. There are a lot of different instances that we can just relate to ourselves and people that we know who fell away. They believed the word, and we call them kind of backsliders. But things came, and they let it go. So this is the second stage, that you done heard it, you believed it, but there was something that came in your life that made you drop it or let go of this belief that you once had.
Now, there are many things that's going to come into your life that's going to cause the word to be choked out of you. And you have to watch out for those things. Now, here we have, in the next slide, we have an extension of that second stage of grace.
Okay, this is still stage 2.
Right.
Okay. Mark's depictions of Yasha's parable of the sower also clearly identifies 2 stages of salvation, grace, with the next stage unnamed. So let's look at these Bibles here, Elder. In the book of Matthew, the 13th chapter, verse 22, it says, "He also that received seed among thorns is he that heareth the word, and the cares of this world and the deceitfulness of riches choke the word, and he becomes unfruitful." Elder, what are some examples of this kind of happening, that a person hears the word and the cares of this world just takes it out of them?
Well, I mean, we have a number of examples that we can look at. Well, the cares of this world, in many cases, are riches. The cares of this world might be a high position of authority among men. People who receive the praises of man, they're so excited about that. They see what man can give them more than what El can give them. So they become unfruitful. The word takes us a back seat to other things of the world. So the cares of the world become more important.
Okay. Then we go to Mark, the 4th chapter, verse 18 through 19. It says something similar to Matthew. It says, "And these are they which are sown among thorns, such that hear the word, and the cares of the world, and the deceitfulness of riches, and the lust of other things entering in choke the word, and it becometh unfruitful." So that's similar to Matthew. And in the book of Luke, the 8th chapter, verse 14, it says, "And what which fell among thorns are they, which when they have heard go forth and are choked with the cares and the riches," says the same thing. So we're talking, this is the second stage. But Elder, before we go on, I want to kind of just backtrack. And we're talking about the seed of Abraham, the DNA of Abraham. How does this so far, what we've said so far, how does this relate to our subjects over the last 3 weeks? What is the purpose of us talking about this parable?
Well, when we're talking about, first of all, we started off talking about circumcision. We started with the Old Covenant promise of circumcision of the foreskin. Then in the New Testament, in the Old Testament again, we found the New Covenant, which talks about not just circumcising the foreskin, but El said, "I'm going to take this position out of man's hand. I'm going to circumcise the heart and the inward parts." But in circumcising the heart and inward parts, we have to find out, how does El circumcise your heart and your inward parts? And he does it through this process, which Mashiach is explaining about the parable of the sower. There's a responsibility that we have. And many of us are shirking our responsibility, because we are responsible for hearing the word. The word is given to us freely. We have the opportunity to hear it. But guess what? We also have an opportunity to reject it once we hear it. And that's what we see happening here in the parable of the sower. People who heard the word, they heard the word and they just went about their business. Then they got to a stage where they heard the word and they believed the word. But other things began to get in the way. And those things took their mind off of the word that they heard and that they believed. And guess what? They became unfruitful. But I'd like to look at Luke 8:14, the last one that you were reading. It says at the end, it talks about the riches and pleasures of this life. That's what got in the way. And bring no fruit to perfection. Now, note, it's using this word perfection now. Because these people got sidetracked, they had no fruit to perfection. So it must be ready to tell us something about perfection that we can reach if we continue. But stage 2 is not the end. It is a means to the end. And we have to recognize that we must hear the word, we must believe the word, and then we must follow the other steps that are outlined in the parable of the sower.
And we're going to go through those next 2 steps now. But when we accomplish all these steps, then we've accomplished faith. And by faith, we're going to do works. Once we hear it and believe it, and we're going to move into faith and works. And this is how our heart is circumcised. The parable of the sower, Yahshua explanation of the steps of grace, salvation, according to Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Now let's talk about stage 3, believing and receiving. Similar to James' expression, Yahshua taught that faith without works is dead. In Matthew, the 13th chapter, verse 23, it says, "But he that receiveth seed into good ground." Now we're talking about, remember we talked about on the stony ground? Now we're on good ground. "Is he that heareth the word and understandeth it." You know, there are a lot of people who hear the word and they're blocked from even understanding it. "Which also beareth fruit." So now when you hear and understand, it's going to bear fruit and bringeth forth. Some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. In both Mark and Luke, they give the same experience. Luke, the 8th chapter, verse 15 says, "But that on good ground are they, which out of an honest and good heart, having heard the word, they keep it and bring forth fruit with patience." So, Elder, this is stage 3. We've heard, we've believed, and we received it.
Right,
so
and that
third stage.
And right there at the top where we have believing, that should be doing. So these people in this particular stage of grace, they not only heard the word, they went to the next step to believe what they heard. But those things were not enough by themselves. And this group here, finally they went to doing what the word said. And that's what it's saying in Luke when it said they keep it and bring forth fruit with patience. So we have 3 writers here. They're writing the Gospels, and each one of them are writing it with their own little nice flavor, but they had the same experiences. But contained in their writings are words that let you know what they're talking about. And we're focusing here on Luke 8:15, where it says they keep it. So these people are not only hearing the word and believing the word, they're keeping the word.
And between stage 2 of believing the word, that's our faith. Now we're in stage 3. We see now they're believing and now they're doing. So now we're talking about works. So now, remember, we're talking about circumcising of the heart. We're talking about El giving us a new heart, writing his law in our inward parts. And so now we can see faith and works. Now, stage 4, Elder, we have to continue in his word. Let's look at these 3 Bible verses, Elder. If you want to go ahead and start reading those, we see not only do we have to hear it, not only do we have to believe it, not only we have to do it, but we have to continue. And these Bible verses are going to show us that.
Now, while we're jumping to these verses, is because some of you are going to say, "Oh, well, that's the end of the parable of the sower. He didn't say anything about continuing it." And the parable of the sower does not say that. However, this is Yahshua still speaking here in Matthew 24:13, or in the Bible. And the point is that we know many verses that would tell you that when he returns, he that's holy, let him be holy still. Now, if you're sinning when he comes, you remain that way because it's not going to change. Don't try to change at the end and then think that you're going to be saved. But if you're holy, you'll be holy when he comes if you continue to live right. So this is a process of doing those things. But you know, if you do those things and you stop, it's not enough. You must continue in the word, and you must continue until he comes. Now it says in Matthew 24:13, "But he that shall endure until the end," that's what we mean by continue, "the same shall be saved." Now, so what are all these steps about? These steps are showing you how to be saved. Many people talk about, "Oh, well, I want the word down in my heart." How do you get it in your heart? You know, we're constantly giving you these Bible studies, and some of you, just be honest with yourself. You don't have to say it to me. You'll listen to the Bible study, and that's the last time you watch it, last time you look at it. But if you want the Word to dwell richly into you and to be in your heart, you must review it. You must rehearse it. You must go over and over again. That is part of the process of getting it in your heart and in your inward part. El is going to seal it. But you got a job to study the Word day and night. In the book of John, the 8th chapter, verse 31, then said he to the Jews, to those Jews which believed on him. Remember we told you in one lesson before there were Jews that believed on him and there were Jews that did not believe on him. He's talking to the ones that believe on him. If, which is a conditional statement, if ye continue in my word, then, this is an if-then statement. Because if you don't continue, you are not. But if you continue, then are you my disciples indeed. You are a disciple of El only when you keep his word and continue in it. And sometimes we like to take this portion of Ecclesiastes and mix it up with that verse and with Matthew. It says, I returned and saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift. You remember how people would tell you, the race not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, but him that endureth to the end? They like to put two verses together to come up with that.
Right.
Nor the battle to the strong, neither yet bread to the wise, nor yet riches to men of understanding, nor yet favor to men of skill, but time and chance happeneth to them all. You have to study the word. What did Psalms tell you? Day and night. You have to meditate in his word. The Bible said for you to study to show yourself approved.
And we're going to bring that in our last. We do have that coming up.
I'm sorry, I'm getting excited.
Go ahead. Go
going
ahead.
ahead of myself.
Get excited.
But you have to be approved. And how are you approved? Through study. When you study, you can show yourself approved. I didn't say when you read. I said when you study, and you got to know how to study, and that's the purpose of this Bible study, to teach you how to study.
Okay, and as you said, Elder, well, this is how we get it in our heart, to keep going over it and going over it, and then it gets sealed. But El is going to do the sealing. But we have to continue on, and it makes perfect sense. If anybody who's listening, they know that you can't say, oh, I've been baptized. I mean, that's some worldly Christianity stuff. Oh, I'm saved. I've been baptized. He died for my sins. And you think that that's it. We have to continue. And it makes sense. You know, if you don't continue to do what El tells you to do, just because you believe in the Sabbath, don't you have to continue to do it once you believe in it?
That's
so
all right.
A lot of people walk around and say, oh, I believe in the Sabbath. Oh, I believe in Passover. Oh, I believe in wearing my head cover when I pray. Oh, you can believe all day long, but El won't accept it unless you do it. What is the will of El? Based upon the preceding passages and a host of others, it is the will of El for all believers to hear the word, believe the word, and keep the word. Now, Luke, the 8th chapter, Elder, verse 19 through 21 says, Then came to him his mother and his brethren. And this is talking about Yahshua, which is Jesus, and could not come at him for the press. And it was told him by certain which said, Thy mother and thy brethren stand without, desiring to see thee. So they were looking for him. And he answered and said unto them, My mother and my brethren are these which hear the word of El and do it. So I just want to choke somebody. All these Bible verses in the New Testament, I mean, from the Old Testament to James to we even see Yahshua himself saying that if you want to be a part of me, then you have to hear the word of El and you have to do it. And yet you have people to continue to say, well, we don't have to do any works. In Romans, the 2nd chapter, verse 13, it says, For not the hearers of the law are just before El, but the doers of the law shall be justified. Here again, we have to hear it, we have to believe it, and we have to do it. And only when you do those three things, then are you justified. So, Elder, we have these two Bible verses here. Did you want to comment at all on each
Yeah.
one of those?
Yes, I do. And I want to say this. Make sure you understand what we're saying. When you hear the word, when you believe the word, and when you do the word, you just reach the point of being justified. That doesn't make you saved. Only way you're going to be saved is you continue in it. So don't go all twisted thinking that, oh, I'm saved because I heard the word, I believe it, and I do it. You have to continue to run the race until he returns. And when he'll say, thou good and faithful servant. So it makes no sense for you to live right today, and then he comes tomorrow and you're not living right, and you, excuse the expression, you bust hell wide open.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because you stopped. You didn't continue in his word. So we must hear, we must believe, we must do it, but we must continue in his word.
Okay. Well, how do you explain Romans, the 3rd chapter, verse 28? And this is justification
That's all right.
by faith.
Now, you need to take these verses down so you'll be able to let individuals know once you study this lesson. Don't just run out and do it today, but once you studied it, so you'll know how to respond to people with these same questions.
And before you answer, Elder, before you read what's on the right, let me read what's on the left. And this is not an in-depth Bible study on the law or on works, but these are some of the Bible verses that people will use to say we don't have to keep the law, we don't have to do any works. Now, we've read a number of Bible verses that said otherwise. And so when you have people to read these kind of Bible verses, then it's talking about two different things or two different laws. Elder, let me read Romans 3:28, and you can comment or read what's on the right. It says, therefore we conclude that a man is justified by faith without the deeds of the law. And they're going to use this Bible verse. So, Elder, we have some stuff over to the right-hand side. If you want to discuss this Bible verse or just read what's on the right there.
Let me start by just taking that verse that you read. Never, ever, ever, ever start with a Bible verse that starts with the word therefore. Therefore is drawing a conclusion. And if you don't know what I said prior to this time, you have no business starting there.
And this is where they'll start.
And that's where people start when they want to tell you that you're justified by faith. Now, we just got to reading tons of verses that tell you that you're justified by works. But we'll let them read this to us and we'll fall flat on our face. Now, based upon the individual's ability to comprehend this Bible study, biblical passages that were used by others to discourage believers from keeping the law are now understood to support keeping it. And let me show you what I mean by that. When you look at Romans 3:28 below, it's often used to suggest that the deeds or the works of the law are not necessary. For Gentiles who have no works to speak of and they justified. Now, first of all, Abraham was justified by faith. We know that clearly. Did that stop Abraham from doing any work? No. So when this verse said, therefore we conclude that a man is justified by faith, it's talking about that first stage of grace. All Gentiles, when they believed, they had no works to speak of in the first place. So we're talking about a person who is a Gentile who now believes. Anybody who believes for the first time is justified by faith.
Mm-hmm.
But you are only justified according to the first stage of grace. Now you must go and do some works.
Right.
Why? Because your works are a sign that you believe. I don't know what you believe if you just believe and it's in your head. Now, so Abraham was justified by faith, but the Bible tells us also in James he was justified by works. James explains that clearly. So faith, as we said, without works is dead. Don't let people let you read one verse in a vacuum and then stump you.
Okay. And I believe that everybody who's here is justified or was justified by faith. There are some things that you heard, that you believed, and there are some things that you have not done. I know many of you have not participated in the Passover. Some of you may have not even been baptized yet because we just haven't gotten to that point with you. There are some other things that you have not done, but you believe, so you are justified by faith. The works is going to come. Eventually, you're going to have to do some of the things that the Bible commands us to do, but you just haven't gotten there yet. So if a person comes in to the faith in June, well, it's a commandment that we must keep the Passover and do some other things. Well, you're justified by faith until that time comes around because you don't have the works. You haven't taken communion. So this is kind of what Romans, the 3rd chapter, verse 28 is saying. And this is what Elder E.B. is explaining to us. How does James explain justification by works? As with Abraham, anyone who has righteousness imputed unto them had no works of righteousness to speak of. This is what I was just saying. Therefore, like Abraham, believers must perform the works of the law in order to remain righteous. Elder, we have these Bible verses here.
Before we read the verses, I want to make this very clear because I don't want people to run off with their pistols half-cocked. Justified don't mean saved.
No.
Look the word up. If you're justified, you are made right. But guess what? When you're sinning, you're made wrong. So when you start to do right or when you start to believe so you can do right, you're made right. But that doesn't mean you're saved. You must continue on so you can be saved. So when we read James, the 2nd chapter, verse 21 and 22, it says, was not Abraham our father justified by works? That's a question. When he had offered Isaac his son upon the altar? Seest thou how faith wrought with his works, and by works was faith made perfect. By itself, faith is not perfect. Faith is made perfect by works.
All right.
And in James, the 2nd chapter, verse 25, likewise, also was not Rahab the harlot justified by works, when she had received the messengers and had sent them out another way? So by faith she did this, but you know what? Guess what? When she had faith, the only way I know she had faith is by what she did. And that's what the book of Hebrews is all about, people who had faith, who did something. So stop telling me you got faith and you're doing nothing. Get off your seat of doing nothing and do something.
Oh, yeah. And stop performing the works without faith. People will come and be a part of the faith for years. They'll come, and then you'll see them sit there on the Sabbath. You'll see them on their knees praying. But there are a lot of people who will come, and there are people who were in the church all throughout with Moses and New Testament church. That was there. It's part of their culture. It's part of what they do. But they didn't have any faith.
That's
now,
all right.
I can't look in your heart. That's between you and Yah. But you must have the faith along with the works.
It's all right.
So how would you explain Romans, Elder, the 3rd chapter, verse 20? And I'll read the verse, and we can go ahead and describe what this under the law mean. It says, now we know that what things soever the law saith, it saith to them who are under the law, that every mouth may be stopped, and all the world may become guilty before El. Therefore, by the deeds of the law, there shall no flesh be justified in his sight. For by the law is the knowledge of sin. Now, people read this, Elder, and they just butcher this all up. So what does this under the law statement mean?
And this is one of the most important things you need to get from this study, is the phrase under law is used in a number of different ways. The way that it's being used here is used in a particular way, and so I don't want you to go out and tell people, oh, every time the word under the law is used this way. No, it's not. But this way is used in this particular verse. We're going to explain what it means. If you look at the top, it says the phrase under the law, as used in Romans 3:19-20, means to be under the curse or under the consequences that are outlined within the law due to noncompliance. Because you're not doing it, you're under a curse. Under what curse? The curse of whatever the law said you're going to get for not doing it. People are under or subject to the consequences of the law because they do not keep the whole law. Therefore, anyone who does not effectively combines faith with works is guilty. For we are not justified by faith alone. Now, this is the point. Just like faith by itself can't justify you, works by itself can't justify you. And this is what many of them under the law did that was in the Old Testament. That's the way I'm using under the law now. They did works and didn't have the faith. Now we got these so-called modern saints that got the faith and don't want to do the works.
Right.
And both of you going to hell for not combining faith and works. Now look at this verse again. Now we know what things whatsoever the law saith. The law is talking to them that are under the law. What's the purpose? That every mouth may be stopped, and all the world may become guilty before El. The purpose of the law is to show you your sin. And if you're not doing what the Bible said, guess what the law does? It stops your mouth by showing you that you're in sin. Therefore, by the deeds of the law, there shall no flesh be justified in his sight. You think you're justified by just? No, what I'm saying, by just doing what the law said?
No.
If you don't have faith, you're not. But you think you justified the law by just believing in what the Bible said? Not if you don't have works, you're not. Because we've shown you over and over that faith without works is dead. And if you forget to do anything that's written in the book of the law, you are under the law. You're guilty of breaking the law.
Great. And under the law again here means under the curse. You are under the curse for not keeping the law. And so we're talking about this new covenant. You can't enter into the new covenant. Jeremiah 31:31. Unless he puts his law in your inwardmost parts, then you're not under the new covenant. And unless you have both faith and works, these people out here talking about we're not under the old covenant, we're under the new covenant. Surprise. If you don't have faith and the works, you are not under the new covenant. So it's important that we understand this, and this is just a glimpse, Elder, of a bigger lessons that we have on faith, on law, on grace. We have a lot more. I don't know if we're going to do it here in this forum, but just to give people an understanding of how your heart is circumcised, how El circumcised your heart, how you become a new creature, how you become a Jew. The Bible says salvation is of the Jews. And so he said it's not outwardly that one is as a Jew, but inwardly.
That's all right.
So now when you are a Jew inwardly, that means that you have both faith and works.
Yes.
And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you need to go back and look at Bible studies on Am I a Christian, on the physical circumcision, and on the seed of Abraham. Elder, how do you explain Galatians, the 3rd chapter, verse 10 through 14? And let me read that real quick here. We have probably about 10 minutes here, 15 minutes. It says, for as many as are of the works of the law are under the curse. Remember we said the works only? You're under the curse. For it is written, cursed is every one that continueth not in all things which are written in the book of the law, to do them. But that no man is justified by the law in the sight of God. It is evident, for the just shall live by faith, and the law is not of faith, but the man that doeth them shall live in them. People will read this verse and they'll mess everybody up. Christ hath redeemed us from the curse of the law. People will read this all the time. He redeemed us.
Yeah.
We're not under the law. He redeemed us from the curse of the law, being made a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is every one that hangeth on a tree, that the blessings of Abraham might come on the Gentiles through Yahshua Mashiach, which is Jesus Christ, that we might receive the promise of the Spirit through faith.
Boy, you said a mouthful there.
Mm.
Now, this verse, you need to take your time. You need to write it down. You need to rehearse it over and over and over again so that when somebody throws this at you, you can read it to them in slow motion. It starts again. I'm sorry I have to read it again. Well, I'm not really sorry, but that's okay. For as many as are of the works. Now, what are we talking about when we say the works of the law? We're talking about people that do works only. That's why it says, for as many as are of the works of the law are under a curse. What curse are you under? you're under the curse that the law itself gives for people that don't do everything in the law, because you're only doing the works. Why? Because it said, curse is everyone that continueth not in all things. Do you know that in the Old Testament, faith was there along with works? Why do you think Abraham believed? He had faith.
Right.
So not only was faith there, works was there. And if he didn't combine his faith with his works, he would have been under the law too. So under the law here just means that you're under the curse that the law prescribes. Not what people say, you're under the law, and that means that you don't have to keep the law because we're no longer under the law. They don't even know what the term means. That phrase doesn't mean what people are trying to say it means. Now, but if you look at it, it says the phrase of the works of the law refers to doing works only. Just like emphasizing works alone subjects individuals to the curse of the law, so does emphasizing faith alone. This is why Abraham combined faith and works. So when Galatians 3:10-14 suggests that we are under the curse of the law for performing works only, it added that we are cursed because we fail to do all things that are written in the book of the law. You got to do everything. So have the faith, have the work, believe the Bible like it says, and do what it says. Not only does the law teach faith, it also teaches works. Therefore, we are obligated to hear the word, to believe the word, to do what the word says, and to continue in the word. For we are justified by every step or every stage of grace. You can't leave out one step.
Right.
Because if you don't do everything that's written in the law, you're under the curse. And that's what under the law means. So, and this is the part they love. Christ has redeemed us from the curse of the law. He redeemed us from that old law. You crazy. What did he redeem us from? He redeemed us from the curses that we were going to get if we didn't keep the law. So that meant he taught us how to keep the law so that we're not under its curse, being made a curse for the law for us. That's why he was on the cross. He was made a curse. That's why the Bible said, curses is everyone that hangeth on a tree. He hung on the cross for your sake and for mine, that we may not be, no longer be under this curse. So we understand that we have to keep the whole law. That's what James said, and don't offend in one point.
And we have about maybe 3 Bible verses that we talked about on tonight. And if you can really read those, and this is one of them, if you can really understand these 3 Bible verses that we've talked about on the law and really understand what it is saying, and then you have those Bible verses like James that tells us that we need both faith and works. You will do a great job in your ministry as far as going against those people who want to deny works or deny the law. And like I said, one day, Elder, we may do something on it, but we have about maybe 20 to 30 lessons on the works or the law.
Oh, so I can't wait.
Oh, man, that's going to be about 5 months, 6 months in a row. We got to do that. So we have about 3 slides left before we conclude. So how do you explain Ephesians, the 2nd chapter, verse 8-9? It says, "For by grace are ye saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of El, not of works, lest any man should boast." Here's another one, Elder.
I really love that verse. And do you know why it's not of works? Because you don't have any works when you believe in the beginning. As a Gentile, there are no works that you were doing. You didn't do any works of the law. You're just learning to believe. Mm-hmm. So that's why it's not of works, because you haven't done any yet. Abraham didn't have any.
Right.
Boy, people can just understand what the Bible is saying.
And now, we have, oh, go ahead, Elder.
No, I'm sorry. I'm just going to continue to read. It said, "Those who keep only the works of the law, or who have faith only, are under the curse of the law. For anyone who does not complete all the steps or the stages of grace, to believe and to do them, they have not followed the example of Abraham." So Abraham is not your father. if you say he's a father of Abraham, I got the blessing of Abraham, not unless you do what Abraham did. Since Abraham had no works to boast of when he first believed, righteousness was imputed by faith. He didn't have any works.
In the beginning.
By faith alone, in the beginning. When he later performed the works, he was justified by works. And James explains that. Because faith and works are distinct stages of justification. I can show you the Bible said you're justified by faith. I can show you where the Bible said you're justified by works. I can show you where the Bible said you're justified by L. And you know what the law is? The law only shows you your sin. The law doesn't make you stop sinning. What it does is you see your sins and then you adjust.
Right.
You straighten out yourself. But the law is there to show you what you're doing wrong. So you can straighten up and do right.
And doesn't that just make sense? I don't know how people just miss that. How do we know what's right and wrong in the eyes of L, lest we have the law? How do we know if we're sinning? I mean, the law shows us our sin. The law doesn't save us. It's L that saves us.
Well, that's what the Bible said. The law is the knowledge of sin. So we know what sin is by reading the law. And then you're going to tell me we don't have to do it?
Yeah. Well, we're going to have some fun with that one. Circumcision, does it profit or not? So let's talk about that as we have one or two more slides left. Circumcision, does it profit or not? And we have the book, we have Romans, the 2nd chapter. I don't know if you want me to read the verses first, or we can just...
Why don't you just read the passage to the left?
Sure. The passages to the right suggest that there is little to no profit from circumcision if we don't keep the law. You know, in the Old Testament, they were physically circumcised of the foreskin, but they fell. These people were not righteous. For it is a sign that one is keeping the law. This is why we talked about the last few weeks, why L needed to give us this new covenant. Why did he have to write it in our inward parts? Because these people that were circumcised of the foreskin, they fell, and they wasn't keeping the law. If the sign of circumcision does not match the deeds of the individual, there is no profit in being circumcised. But as a token of the covenant, circumcision of the foreskin has outlived its usefulness as a true indicator, because even non-believers are being circumcised. You go to the doctor or hospital, somebody's born, I don't care what faith and what religion or what, they ask everybody, do you want to be circumcised? Circumcision of the heart and inward parts, on the other hand, is a more accurate description, seeing that L will write his law within the heart, which is our mind, and the inward parts of man. So,
and let me just say that the only thing that we're using these verses for is to show you that there is very little profit in being circumcised if you're not a keeper of the law. And that's what Romans 2:25 says, for circumcision verily profiteth, if thou keepest the law. But guess what? If thou be a breaker of the law, thy circumcision is made uncircumcision. So you're just doing better than a Gentile if you don't keep the law. What's the most important thing? That you keep the law, not the circumcision necessarily. He circumcised you so that he could put his law in your heart. And that's what we have to remember. Romans, the 3rd chapter, verse 1 and 2, what advantage then hath the Jew? Or what profit is there of circumcision? Now we're still asking the same question. Does it profit? The answer here seems like a contradiction, because it says much, every way. There's a profit for circumcision, if you keep the law, of course, chiefly because that unto them were committed the oracles of El. Who do you think he gave his written and spoken words to? To the Jews. And those that did it, they had much profit in circumcision. So many times you read about circumcision, if it seems to be saying something negative, more than likely it's talking about under that old covenant circumcision of the flesh.
Okay. And then we have Galatians, the 5th chapter, verse 6. It says, for in Yahshua Mashiach, Jesus Christ, neither circumcision availeth anything, nor uncircumcision, but faith which worketh by love.
Okay.
And go ahead.
No, you go ahead. No, that's fine.
And I was going to just read Galatians, the 6th chapter, verse 15. It says, for in Mashiach, Yahshua, neither circumcision availeth, says the same thing, availeth anything, nor uncircumcision, but a new creature.
And that's what El is trying to get at. He wants you to be born again. The purpose of circumcision is so that you can become that new creature by allowing him to put his word in your heart. And it's not going to get there by osmosis. You got to study, baby. You got to read the word. You got to overknow the word. And when you keep doing that and meditate in his law day and night, guess what? One day you're going to wake up and it's going to be in your heart and you can't get it out.
All right, and we're going to talk about that on a last slide here. And it's important that we think, as you said, through osmosis. Some people say, well, Yah saved me. And you sit there just like you say, I have faith without works. Well, you're going to have to do something. Part of Yah putting it in your heart is that you are going to have to do something. We're going to talk about that in 2 more slides before we close out. Which circumcision is necessary for salvation, Elder? We talked about this on the mystery of the physical circumcision. Which circumcision is necessary for our salvation?
I think if we pay attention carefully to the question, it pretty much gives us an answer. The circumcision that's necessary for salvation is circumcision of the heart and the inward part. Because now under both circumcision, the circumcision itself was a token of the covenant. It was a sign that you kept the law, whether it was under the old covenant or the new covenant of circumcision. The point is that under that old covenant of circumcision, it's not necessary for salvation. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't be circumcised, because circumcision is a good thing. But it's not a requirement for you to be saved. So, but it is a requirement for you to allow El to circumcise your heart, because that's the only way the word is going to be put in you, and it's going to dwell richly within you and stay in you. That's where you are born of El, and the Bible says he cannot sin. Why? Because the seed remaineth in him. So El puts that seed down in your heart, in your mind, in your inward parts, and you just can't sin. But guess what? If you don't know the law, you can, because the law is the knowledge of sin. And if you know what sin is and you got the word in your heart, you won't do anything that's a sin.
Right. And then Romans, the 2nd chapter, verse 28 through 29, we read this a lot on the Bible study, Am I a Christian? It says, for he is not a Jew, which is one outwardly, neither is that circumcision, which is outward in the flesh. Now, we're talking about the physical circumcision of the foreskin. But he is a Jew. Now, who is a Jew? Now we're talking about this new covenant. He is a Jew, which is one inwardly, and circumcision is that of the heart, in the spirit and not in the letter, whose praise is not of men but of El. So if you meditate on these Bible verses and meditate on these Bible studies, it'll start making sense to you, Romans, the 3rd chapter, when it says, what advantage then hath that you much in every way, but until then was committed the oracles of El. When you read the book of John, the 4th chapter, verse 22, when it says salvation is of the Jews, until you came into this knowledge, you didn't know what that meant, because you said, I'm a Negro from Chicago, Illinois, from Cleveland, Ohio. I don't know. I'm not a Jew. But now you should be able to start to understand that you are not a Negro from wherever you say you are. You are not a black person or a white person, but if your heart is circumcised, the Bible says that you are a Jew, and you are a Jew inwardly. This is why salvation is of the Jews.
And for heaven's sake, you are not a sinner saved by grace, because sinners are not saved by grace.
All right. Corinthians, the 7th chapter, verse 18 through 19 says, is any man called being circumcised? Let him not become uncircumcised. Is any called in uncircumcision? Let him not be circumcised. Circumcision is nothing, and uncircumcision is nothing, but the keeping of the commandments of El.
That's what's important.
That's what's important. And when you keep the commandments, then you are circumcised in the heart. This is our last slide before we close out. Thank you for bearing with us. Why should we study the Bible? Elder, we talked about this is a two-way street. And this is why, you know, the Bible says that understanding keeps us.
That's all right.
How do you get understanding? You have to study. You have to read. You have to meditate. You have to form your little Bible groups. You have to talk about the Word. Elder and I talk about the Word all day, every day. At work, I'm working. We talk about it. And believe it or not, we spend about a week on a particular Bible study talking about the verses. And even when we conclude at the end of the night, after I upload it, I listen to this Bible study. Because I get something. I talk so much that I don't even know half what was said until I go back and listen to it later on. And when I get to work the next day, I listen to it. And about 2 weeks later, I listen to it. And although I go through all this stuff, Elder, I still get more. I learn. I learn by hearing myself. Oh, I said that. Oh, Elder said that. And I go back and start looking at the Bible verses again. So we have to do our part in order for it to get sealed in us.
That's all right.
In the book of Joshua, the 1st chapter, verse 8, it says, "This book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night." I meditate on the word when I'm driving. I meditate on the word when I'm sitting here. It's always going through my head. But why should we meditate on the word day and night? That thou mayest observe to do according to all that is written. Now the Bible is telling us that what we've read in the law, we need to meditate on it, and then we must do it. It says, "For then thou shalt make thy way prosperous, and thou shalt have good success." If you want to have a prosperous way, if you want to have a good success, keep the law. Meditate on it day and night, and do what is written in the law.
And let me stop you for a minute, because I want to point out that you said that you meditate on the word in your car. No, he didn't say I read it. He's not picking up the Bible and reading it while you're driving. At least I'm hoping that's not what's happening. He said he meditate on it.
Oh, I think about it.
And you can think about it. Just don't pick up your Bible reading while you're driving.
No, I don't do that. And when you think about it, you know what I do? Okay, if the Jehovah's Witnesses come to me and say this, and I'm practicing, I'm in the car, and if they're looking at me on the side, they're like, "What is wrong with this crazy man?" I'm talking to myself, and I'm thinking about all the possible things that the Jehovah's Witnesses can say to me, and then I'm pulling out the Bible verses that I went over, that I've studied. I'm thinking about what people say to me about the law. Go home and write down, after this Bible study, sometime this week, you go down and write down all the questions that people will say to you when they go against the law or they go against works. And that's what I did, Elder. Some years ago, I wrote down everything. What are they going to say about the Sabbath? What have they said to me about the Sabbath? Write down all those questions. And then I started going back and looking at the Bible verses and listening to the Bible studies. How I'm going to attack them when they say this. Then when they come back and they rebuttal, how I'm going to attack them. So you always have to go through this stuff in your head. Let me shut up. I'm talking too much. 2 Timothy, the 2nd chapter, verse 15. Elder says, "Study to show thyself approved unto El, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed." What happens when you study? You learn to rightly divide the word of truth. All right, so this is the reason why we should study.
That's all right.
And lastly, Elder, John the 5th chapter, verse 39 says, "Search the scriptures." You know what searching means, right?
Oh, yes.
You a real silly kid if you played hide and seek and they counted 10 and turned around and you were standing right there. They had to search for you. What kind of something wrong with you? Search the scriptures, for in them you think ye have eternal life, and they are they which testify of me. So, Elder, if you want to add on anything else, why we should, how does studying seal us? How does El operate when we study and learn this information and circumcise our hearts?
Well, you have to read the word, meditate on it, so that you could have the word available. You'll know what the Bible says. And you have to do this consistently, over and over again. The Bible is a mystery. Now, when you want to understand what the Bible is saying on a particular subject, that message is scattered throughout the entire Bible. And you know what we're doing for you? We're putting it together so you can read it in a particular pattern and understand it. But you got to get to the point where you can read it and understand it, and that when you've done it over and over again, you get on a particular subject and those verses will begin to come into your mind. You don't know when you get sealed, because The word is going to be hid in your heart, and when somebody talks to you about the word, it's going to just come up naturally. What we fail to do, saints, is we expect the minister to study for us. It said, study to show thyself approved. Unto who? Unto El. A workman that needs not to be ashamed. If you're going to be approved, you got to study. You don't study, you can't be approved. It's as simple as that. And just like there's a right way to divide the word of truth, there's a wrong way. And you know what? You better learn the word so you'll know when somebody is dividing it wrong to you.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to study. One writer said, thy word have I hid in my heart. Why? That I might not sin against thee. I don't know if I'm going to sin if I don't know what the word says sin is. Learn the word. Have the word in your heart. And when it's needed, it'll come up. It'll come out. And it will keep you and bless you.
All right. Amen. Boy, we try to cut down to 15 slides, and we still, talk as long as we had when we had 30 or 40. So we might have to cut it down to 10. So the Bible study, we are going to open it up for questions here. If anybody has any questions, we ask that you star 6 on your keypad, star 6 on your phone, and we will take any questions that you may have. We want to encourage you again, and I'll just go back to what we had in the beginning. I want to encourage you to look over the Bible studies that we had on the first 3 lessons here to get a better understanding. Am I really a Christian? Understanding the mystery of the law of circumcision and the DNA of the seed of Abraham. Those are the 3 that we had in sequential order before we got to this one. And so this was a great lesson. I hope you got something out of it. I hope that you go back and just really get 2 or 3 people and say, hey, we're going to look at the Bible study on Tuesday, or you can look at it and we're going to talk about it on Thursday night again, and write the Bible verses down and just continue to get better and grow. There's nothing super or special about me. I did exactly what I'm telling you to do, and this is how I learned. And so we hope that this helped you all in your study and in your ministry. And we just want to move on forward and answer any questions that you may have at this time. Elder, while we're waiting just a couple of minutes for any questions, you have any departing?
I would just like to inform those that are out there, if you had any questions, any subject that gives you a difficult time understanding it, and you want to understand it better, we're asking you to write to us, send us the information that you would like to know about, and we will begin to plan Bible studies surrounding that information so that we can help you to help yourself.
Okay. And I believe that the next 2 Bible studies, if I'm not mistaken, don't quote me on it, I think we're talking about the role of women in the church. We're going to talk about the women. On our part 1, we're going to talk about the ministry of the woman in the church. I think part 2, we're going to talk about the duties that women have. Why do they have their heads covered? We talk about the makeup and just a lot of different things. Are women unclean when they come into temple? A lot of things that surround the women and women issues that needs to be addressed. So we have no questions. We're going to get ready to close out here. You can watch this Bible study on our YouTube page, or you can go to Beyth-el.net. We will have that uploaded no later than 10:30 p.m. Central Time on tonight. If you have any questions on this subject now or in the future, those people can send questions to us at BibleStudy@Beyth-el.net. Myself and Elder Ivory will answer those questions, and we will get back with you. If you have, as Elder Ivory said, contact me personally, send me a message, send us an email if you would like for us to discuss any particular topic here on our Wednesday night Bible studies. We would definitely like for you to join us to learn more about us. We ask that you log onto our webpage at www.tvbeythel.net, and we have members all over the country. We want to thank those who are listening in from 2 parts of Florida, I see, from Chicago, those that are down in Tennessee and Wisconsin. We want to thank you for joining us, Atlanta, Georgia. We want to thank you for joining us, Las Vegas, Nevada. Come to Beyth-el. You can enjoy many of our benefits. We are revving up, and Elder Evie and I are working on some exciting things. So soon you'll be able to see us on closed circuit TV and access many of our weekly TV audio seminars. So again, we would love for you to become a member of Beyth-el Temple and College. Again, look us up at www.tvbeythel.net. I want to thank you for joining us on tonight, for making the sacrifice to learn more and to get closer to Yah and to get your hearts right. So we will see you all this Sabbath, and we will hope to see you all 8 p.m. sharp next Wednesday as we talk about the role of the women in the church. All right, you all have a good night.
Shalom.
All right, shalom.